Hello and welcome to Emma's ESL English. This week, I'm sort of spoiling myself. So hopefully you've worked it out. We're nearly at the end of October, which means Halloween. This is kind of a busy time of year in the UK. We have Halloween on the 31st of October. I had to think about that then. And then on the 5th of November, we have Guy Fawkes Night, which is a whole other thing. So I'm kind of thinking I'm gonna devote our podcast to these things. So today and tomorrow we're doing Halloween, and then next week we'll be looking at Guy Fawkes, which is probably a complete mystery to anybody who doesn't live in the UK. So, it'll be interesting. I was gonna just give you a list of Halloween vocabulary, and then I thought, that's kind of boring. So I'll give you a list in the blog I'll give you a great website that has a whole list of Halloween vocabulary. But that's kind of not very interesting. It's good to know, especially if you work in a school and you want to do Halloween with your kids, then I think it's good to know those words, and it's definitely a big part of British and American culture, dressing up with kids and going trick-or-treating. But in terms of an English lesson, it's not very exciting. So instead, as I said, I'm spoiling myself. You'll have to excuse me. It happens. I was thinking, and then I remembered this book. Are you shocked? Are you really shocked? You're probably not shocked. And I started to decide which one, and I ended up with two possible options. And then I was just thinking, I'll just do the Halloween. And then when I looked at the vocabulary, I thought, let's read both of them. Okay, so that's the plan. I'm reading from two sections of Terry Pratchett's Wintersmith. Both of these sections are about a witch called Miss Treason. Terry Pratchett has some awesome names for characters in his books, and witches particularly get some really cool and totally not normal names. And this particular witch is very eccentric. She's eccentric. And we're seeing this witch through the eyes of Tiffany Aching, who is the main character of this and about 5 Terry Pratchett books. Tiffany Aching is the reason I started reading Terry Pratchett. The very first Tiffany Aching book, We Free Men, is actually written for young adults, and it was the only reason I could get into this Discworld fantasy. So I love the witches books. So Tiffany at this point is about 11 or 12, and she is apprenticing with Miss Treason. But Miss Treason is quite a character, as you will see. And hopefully you'll see why I've picked these two. The first segment is setting the scene for us. It's really telling us who Miss Treason looks like. And then the second reading is telling us what's going on behind the scenes. So I think this is relevant for Halloween because it's really common in the West that we dress up our houses. And a lot of people in America go a little crazy and make haunted houses for people when they're doing trick-or-treating. So this idea of what's behind the costume, I think, is relevant. All right, so here we go. Miss Treason. Now, there's quite a lot of vocabulary in both of these, and in this particular one, we have, Terry really expands on an idiom. So if you head over to the blog, then I will talk about that a little bit more in the blog. Okay. But when it came to odd, Miss Treason didn't just take the cake, but a packet of biscuits too, with sprinkles on top and also a candle. Where to start? When things were wall-to-wall odd. Miss Eumenides Treason had gone blind when she was 60 years old. To most people, that would have been a misfortune, but Miss Treason was skilled at borrowing a particular witch talent. She could use the eyes of animals, reading what they saw right out of their minds. She'd gone deaf when she was 75 too, but she'd got the hang of it by now and used any ears she could find running around. When Tiffany had first gone to stay with her, Miss Treason had used a mouse for seeing and hearing because her old jackdaw had died. It was a bit worrying to see an old woman striding around the cottage with a mouse in her outstretched hand. And very worrying if you said something and the mouse was swung around to face you. It's amazing how creepy a little pink wriggly nose could be. The new ravens were a lot better. Someone in one of the local villages had made the old woman a perch that fitted across her shoulders, one bird on each side. And with her long white hair, the effect was very, well, witchy. Although a bit messy down the back of her cloak by the end of the day. Then there was her clock. It was heavy and made of rusty iron by someone who was more blacksmith than watchmaker, which was why it went clonk, clank instead of tick-tock. She wore it on her belt and could tell the time by feeling the stubby little hands. There was a story in the villages that the clock was Miss Treason's heart, which she used ever since her first heart died. But there were lots of stories about Miss Treason. You had to have a high threshold for odd to put up with her. It was traditional that young witches travelled around and stayed with older witches to learn from a lot of experts, in exchange for what Miss Tick, the witchfinder, called some help with the chores, which meant doing all the chores. Mostly they left Miss Treason's after one night, the other witches. Tiffany had stuck it out for 3 months so far. Oh, and sometimes when she was looking for a pair of eyes to look through, Miss Treason would creep into yours. It was a strange, prickly sensation, like having someone invisible looking over your shoulder. Yes, perhaps Miss Treason didn't just take the cake, a packet of biscuits with sprinkles on top and a cake and a candle, but also the trifle, the sandwiches, and a man who made amusing balloon animals afterwards. She was weaving at her loom when Tiffany came in. 2 beaks turned to face her. "Ah, child," said Miss Treason in a thin, cracked voice. "You've had a good day?" "Yes, Miss Treason," said Tiffany obediently. "You've seen the Weatherwax, the girl Weatherwax, and she is well?" Click, clank, went the loom. Clonk, clank, went the clock. "Quite well," said Tiffany. Miss Treason didn't ask questions, she just told you the answers. The girl Weatherwax, Tiffany thought, as she started to get their supper. But Miss Treason was very old and very scary. It was a fact. You couldn't deny it. She didn't have a hooked nose, and she did have all her teeth, even if they were yellow. But after that, she was a picture book wicked witch. And her knees clicked when she walked, and she walked very fast with the help of 2 sticks, scuttling around like a big spider. That was another strange thing. The cottage was full of cobwebs, which Miss Treason ordered Tiffany never to touch, but you never saw a spider. Oh, and there was the thing about black, too. Most witches liked black, but Miss Treason even had black goats and black chickens. The walls were black. The floor was black. If you dropped a stick of licorice, you'd never find it again. And so, to Tiffany's dismay, she had to make her cheeses black, which meant painting the cheeses with shiny black wax. Tiffany was an excellent cheesemaker, and it did keep them moist. But Tiffany distrusted black cheeses. They always looked as though they were plotting something. And Miss Treason didn't seem to need sleep. She hadn't got much use for night and day now. When the ravens went to bed, she'd summon up an owl and weave by owl sight. An owl was particularly good, she said, because it'd keep turning its head to watch the shuttle of the loom. Click, clank, went the loom. Clonk, clank, went the clock right back at it. Miss Treason, with her billowing black cloak and bandaged eyes and wild white hair. Miss Treason with her 2 sticks, wandering the garden and the cottage in the dark and frosty night, smelling the memory of flowers. All witches had some particular skill, and Miss Treason delivered justice. People would come from miles around to bring her their problems. I know it's my cow, but he says it's his. She says it's her land, but her father left it to me. And Miss Treason would sit at the click-clanking loom with her back to the room full of anxious people. The loom worried them. They watched it as though they were afraid of it, and the ravens watched them. They would stutter out their case, umming and ahhing, while the loom clattered away in the flickering candlelight. Oh yes, the candlelight. The candle holders were 2 skulls. One had the word Inoki carved on it. The other had the word Athiotetia. The words meant guilt and innocence. The candles had dripped wax all over the skulls, and people would keep glancing at them the whole time they were in the room. And then, when all the words had been said, the loom would stop with a shock of sudden silence, and Miss Treason would turn around in her big heavy chair, which had wheels on it, and remove the black blindfold from her pearly grey eyes and say, I have heard, now I shall see. I shall see what is true. Some people would actually run away at this point. When she stared at them in the light from the skulls, those eyes that could not see your face would somehow see your mind. When Miss Treason was looking right through you, you could only be very truthful or very, very stupid. Okay, so more tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will put the vocabulary in the blog at www.mcslenglish.com. See you tomorrow. Bye.